Why should we pay for travel expenses when the public need us to do their thinking for them?
You wake up, pay your bills, pay your rent, pay your taxes, and somewhere someone is using that money to claim hundreds of pounds a trip to travel to their own office. No, not satire, not exaggeration. That's real. Let's break it down. Senior civil servants, people already on high salaries, have been claiming thousands of pounds in expenses for travelling to their own departmental headquarters in London. One official claimed over £7,000 for just 9 trips, another over £7,200 across 10 visits, and one made 31 journeys in just 3 months, costing nearly £3,500. Let that sink in. You commute, you pay for it. Every day, no reimbursement, no sympathy. But in this system, they bill you for showing up to work. Let's strip away the language, because expenses sounds clean, professional, reasonable. But what this actually is taxpayers funding the commute of people who already earn more than most of the taxpayers funding them. And it gets worse. These aren't random trips. They exist because the government moved thousands of roles out of London to supposedly save money and decentralize power. Sounds good, right? Efficient, forward thinking, except now those same people are traveling back to London and billing the public for it. So, what exactly was saved? Because right now it looks like this: you move the jobs out, then pay for them to come back. That's not efficiency, that's a loop, a very expensive loop.
The media is saying we are rotten and entitled. We must manipulate them into siding with us. Yes, we need a coordinated strategy.
I agree. Let's start with the press office and brief our allies.
Critics didn't hold back. They called it a rotten culture of entitlement. And honestly, you can hear why. Because this isn't just about money, it's about mindset. It's about a system where the rules feel different depending on who you are. Accountability feels optional, and the people paying aren't the people deciding. Because ask yourself something simple: if a regular worker tried to expense their commute, what would happen? Exactly. So why does it work here? Now, to be fair, the government has responded. They say these aren't normal commutes, they're official travel, and overall office closures are saving millions. They even claim this spending is tiny compared to broader savings. And on paper, that might make sense. But here's the problem: people don't live on spreadsheets, they live on experience. And the experience is this: you're being told to tighten your belt while someone else is charging £900 a trip to attend meetings. That disconnect, that's where anger comes from. Because let's be real, this isn't about trains or hotels or meals. This is about trust. Because every time something like this comes out, it reinforces a feeling that there are two systems: one for the public, one for the people running it. And the rules aren't the same. That's the real damage, not the £139,000 spent in 3 months. It's the perception that nobody is really watching how that money is used. Now, some people will say, this isn't that much money, and technically, they're right. In the context of government spending, this is small, but that's not the point, because politics isn't just about scale, it's about symbolism. And this symbol is loud. It says we can justify anything. And once people believe that, everything becomes suspect. Here's how systems like this sustain themselves.
First, create a rule. Next, create exceptions to that rule. Then, expand the definition of those exceptions, until eventually, the exception becomes normal.
Step 1, create a rule. Step 2, create exceptions to that rule. Step 3, expand the definition of those exceptions. Until eventually, the exception becomes normal. And nobody inside the system sees the problem anymore, because from their perspective, it's all justified, policy compliant, procedure approved. But from the outside, it looks insane. Now, here's what's changed. People are less tolerant of this than they used to be because everything else is getting harder. Energy bills rising, rent rising, food costs rising. So when people see this, it doesn't land as a technical issue, it lands as disrespect, a signal that the system isn't feeling what they're feeling. And this is where it gets uncomfortable because this isn't an isolated story. It's part of a pattern where systems optimize for themselves, justifications become automatic, and accountability becomes delayed, not absent, just slow enough to not matter in the moment. And over time, that builds something dangerous, not outrage, cynicism, because outrage burns out, cynicism settles in. It becomes the voice that says, of course they're doing this. And once that voice becomes normal, trust doesn't just weaken, it disappears. So, yeah, this isn't about train tickets. It's not about whether someone stayed in a hotel or took first class. It's not even really about the exact amount of money. It's about what this represents. Because when you zoom out, what you're looking at is a system that has quietly normalized things that would never be tolerated anywhere else. Imagine walking into your own workplace, submitting an expense claim for getting there, and expecting it to be approved, not laughed at, not rejected, approved, processed, paid. That sounds ridiculous in any normal context, but here it's policy compliant. And that's the problem, because once something becomes policy compliant, it stops being questioned internally. Nobody inside the system is sitting there thinking, hold on, this feels off. They're thinking this is within the rules. And when everything is filtered through rules instead of reality, you get outcomes like this, perfectly justified on paper, completely detached in practice. And this is how it happens, not through corruption in the dramatic sense, not through some villain sitting in a room plotting misuse, but through normalization, slow, incremental, bureaucratic normalization, where one exception becomes routine, one justification becomes standard, one workaround becomes policy, until eventually nobody remembers what the original boundary even was. And that's when things get dangerous, because systems don't usually break with a loud crash, they drift. They drift away from common sense, away from public expectation, away from the reality people are actually living in. And the further they drift, the harder it becomes to bring them back. Now, here's what really fuels the frustration. It's not just the spending, it's the contrast. Because at the same time this is happening, people are being told, be more efficient, cut back, accept higher costs, adjust expectations. And that messaging hits differently when it's not applied evenly. Because people aren't stupid. They can feel inconsistency immediately. They can see when rules are strict in one direction and flexible in another. And that's what creates that underlying irritation, that constant low level sense that something isn't balanced, not broken enough to collapse, but misaligned enough to be felt every day. Because here's the truth, the financial cost isn't the real issue. £139,000 in 3 months in the context of government spending is small, but the trust cost, that's massive. Because every story like this chips away at something intangible, something that doesn't show up in budgets. Belief, belief that the system is fair, belief that decisions are grounded, belief that someone somewhere is applying common sense. And once that belief starts to erode, you don't just get complaints, you get detachment. People stop expecting better, stop believing change will happen, stop engaging with the system as something that reflects them, And that's far more dangerous than any expense claim. Now, here's the uncomfortable question: why does this keep happening? And the answer isn't satisfying, because the system isn't designed to feel outrage. It's designed to function, to process, to approve, to operate within its own logic. And unless something forces it to change, it doesn't. Because from the inside, nothing is technically wrong. It's all justified, all documented, all within the rules, and that's exactly why it persists. So when you look at this, don't just see a story about expenses. See a system that has quietly drifted to a point where things that feel obviously unreasonable are treated as completely normal. And the real question isn't whether this specific case gets fixed. It's this: how far does a system have to drift before someone inside it finally says, this might be allowed, but it still doesn't make sense